I think we're all well fed. Thanks everybody who brought the meal for tonight. Who brought the food tonight? Well done. Thank you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is building a workplace that doesn't recreate the structures of oppression in the society. So I'm starting from the assumption that that our whole economic system is built on different kinds of oppression. Slavery of African American people and Native American people in this country, the unpaid work of women throughout, the centuries since capitalism began, the kinds of I've got one ear on the interpreter. I need to refocus my brain. No, it's good. So our economic system and the accumulation of wealth and power, the way that it's accumulated more towards white people, more towards male people, throughout the last couple of centuries, is built on these structures of oppression. Is everybody? We're all together on that page. Am I right? Does anybody? Do we need any discussion on that? Okay, great. So the challenge then, we all know that we've been kind of indoctrinated in this system. So the question is, how do we build systems that don't recreate that dynamic inside our cooperatives? So the document that we're going to look at is this one that has the heart on the bottom. Hi Kaylin. That has the heart on the bottom. This comes from an organization called AORTA, which is an anti-oppression, well, it's literally Anti-Oppression Resources and Training Alliance. They're a group from Philadelphia that does training for groups about how to build anti-oppressive workplaces. We have so many things, babies and dogs and so many things going on. Okay, so this document from AORTA gives us a couple of main points. One of them is what kind of things to look out for in your organization, the kind of things that often happen in organization where that can be overlooked sometimes, that sometimes people just let it slide, sometimes people don't feel empowered to speak up about these sorts of things. Let's just do, will somebody volunteer to read just the first two of each group? So will somebody read the first two items under racism and white supremacy? Somebody volunteer? Yeah.
All right.
Read slow so an interpreter can keep up.
The assumption of white as the norm. Talk about needing to pull people of color in to diversify the co-op rather than needing to change the co-op culture, build cultural competence so that people of color will want to work at the co-op. Oh yeah, and that's it.
Okay. I don't want to read the whole document because it's long, but I just want to give people a sense of what's in here. Will somebody volunteer to read the first couple under patriarchy and male supremacy? Volunteer? Yeah.
Policies and bylaws that use gender binary language, he, she, rather than gender neutral pronouns, they, them. Office space has gender segregated bathrooms.
How about one more?
Leadership or public face of the co-op is disproportionately male.
Okay, next one. So these are different dimensions that we're talking about of oppression. The next section that they have here is capitalism, class, income, and wealth. Will somebody volunteer to read the first two or three? Let's read the first three under there. Volunteer? Yeah.
Meetings are unpaid. Childcare not provided for unpaid meetings. Meetings are held outside of work hours, such as on evenings or weekends.
Thank you. The next one is ableism, mental, physical, emotional ability. Will somebody read the first three under there?
Only full-time workers get health benefits. No options for part-time work. And if you can't work, you don't get paid.
Thank you. And will somebody read the first three under the next section? Homophobia and heteronormativity. Yes, please.
Assumption of straight as the norm. Lack of recognition of queer people. Off-campus comments, jokes that equate gay with bad, weak, lesser, gross, and gross.
Thanks. So everybody has experience with these sorts of dynamics, right? The people from Aorta are also volunteering different strategies for dealing with these things when they do arise in organizations, which they will. I wanted to ask who has a story or who has a narrative of something that's happened in a real organization and how you handled it along some dimension of oppression. Does anybody have something that they'd like to share?
Give an example.
Yeah.
In our co-op in particular, we noticed that male pedicab drivers were making more money on tips than female pedicab drivers, as like a reflection of the system of oppression on the whole. And so that's part of why we switched to a stipend system, where we don't just get paid based off of our tips. We return our money to the co-op, and then the co-op pays it back to us to kind of account for that, those inequities in the system.
Wow, interesting.
Which was a hard conversation for a lot of the men in our co-op that didn't want to acknowledge the privilege of being a male, or like of the perception that men are stronger and that customers would buy into that. So it was a really tricky set of conversations where we ended up deciding to make some policy changes, which was good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you first of all had to recognize that there was a problem. I mean, how did you notice that? How did you notice that there was a difference?
We just noticed, looking at our log of drivers and tips, and we compounded it into a huge document that showed what each driver was making on each night, and like similar hours but making very different tips was our red flag there, or just seeing that like we had 3 male drivers, 3 men drivers, 3 women, and then the rates were just totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no other clear difference as to why that would be.
So you had a system of transparency. That sounds like really the key, the key to recognizing that you had an issue, and then the way that you remedied that was by changing the policy of how the tips were distributed.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that happens to be one of the items here. So Aorta talks about different tactics for, they call it interrupting these systems of oppression, and one of them was developing policies, basically developing policies, putting stuff in writing that is designed to protect people in that kind of a situation. Who else has got an example and a solution that they came up with? Check. Somebody does. Nobody's encountered any oppression in their organizations or fixed it?
I mean, in Connections Co-op, we just decided that we were not gonna have, even though like that breaks some of the laws of co-ops, that not to have male members. So we recognized that it was really hard to like work these things out, and we decided not to. So if we would have the male worker, it would not be a member. So they couldn't be voting members.
Yeah.
So they will get paid like the same way and everything, but they would not be voting.
Yeah. That's really interesting because you said it like maybe that's not quite legal, and I'm not sure it's illegal, but this has come up with a lot of different groups that we've talked to that people want to organize a cooperative that's only women. People want to organize a cooperative that's only people of color or only speakers of one language. There's been a co-op that I worked with that was organizing only for transgender people who wanted a work environment that was going to be, responsive to their needs. And that is a question, like, does the law allow you to do that? Because we have laws about employment discrimination, and can you actually do that? Usually you work something out about creating a workplace that's attractive to the people that you want to have working there without going so far as to explicitly exclude people. But you do have a choice about who you hire.
We didn't exclude work, like
right.
They could work, they just couldn't be a voting member.
Yeah.
So there may be legal constraints on that. I mean, it does seem like so you have to find some language that would allow you to make the
Exactly. So which is why we have the next handout. Is the Michigan thing in here? Yeah, here we go. So, okay. Alright, so it starts on the back of this page. This is a document that came from the University of Michigan. It's just an accident that it came from the University of Michigan. I just thought it was a really good document. I think that this reflects federal laws, so it's not really a state-by-state thing. But this document gives you examples of the kind of things you can say, and not just the kind of things you can say, but the kind of way you can restructure your thinking about what what kind of skills and qualities people need to be able to have to do their jobs in the cooperative, right? So this gives you examples of language, for example, let's look at the chart that looks like this about language around disability. So, they suggest things like if you have a job description that says you must be able to lift 50 pounds, sometimes that's a thing that people say, and a lot of building materials especially are bundled in 50-pound bundles because that's how much they expect people to be able to lift. So instead of using this language about lifting 50 pounds, you can, mostly they say to be more specific and say things like, this document says routinely moves audio or visual equipment weighing up to 50 pounds across campus for various classrooms and event needs. So that's allowing for someone who's going to use some other kind of mechanism instead of just lifting and carrying something. It allows for people who are going to use a lot of different methods or tools or whatever it is they're going to use to get that 50-pound thing across campus. So it's focusing on the task that needs to be done, not the quality of the person who needs to do it. So it's allowing for everybody to meet the task the way that they're going to meet it. So I would just encourage you.
So could you say needs to be able to work in a work setting without oppressing women, or something like that, and then all men have inherent, like sexism that we've been, so we're just not allowed in the workplace.
You'd probably have to talk to an employment lawyer about that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Could you have something like I've seen some job postings where one of the requirements is you have to fit the culture. Like if you don't fit the culture, they won't. And that's like vague enough.
Yeah.
That I don't think that. What does that mean? It means they have to like you.
Yeah, actually that reminded me of an example. I had a friend who, she's like pretty radical, but she's like probably like one of the smartest people I know. And she worked in this office environment, and she was like, whatever she was doing, it was right out of college. She was really good at it. She's also like a black woman. And so it's a majority white office space, and so she's like coming in and like doing things, and then and I think, I don't know, she didn't have the job, she was interviewing for the job. So like she had all the skills that they were required and all these things, and they told her, they used those exact words, I just don't think you fit the culture of our office. And it's just like, well, what does that mean? It's such a vague thing when you know how to do what you're supposed to be doing, and you're a professional, and you're all these things, but you don't fit the culture. Like, yeah, that wording is sort of like, it's used.
Potential for abuse.
And so how could you rephrase it? I mean, what if it is important that, I mean, yeah, how do you get around that? Not get around it, but how do you effectively communicate your expectations of how people should behave on the job without making discriminatory statements like that? I mean, what do you think they should have done?
I honestly, like, I mean, who knows what would have worked? Like, you know, maybe she wasn't gonna, maybe it would have been terrible for her to work there, you know, but. So I'm going at it as more of a like, well, maybe it was for the better, you know, maybe like, but that's not the point at that point, you know. You're looking for a job, you have the skills, and you want to be employed. So how could they have prevented that?
Well, like, how would you, I mean, how?
Because they would have had to say like, well, we only want, the culture looks like this, and this is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
But you don't fit the culture is like the biggest thing you could say to somebody.
Yeah.
Which is like, we're not going to tell you what you did wrong. We're not going to tell you what it was that we didn't like about you. We're just going to tell you don't fit the culture. Like.
Yeah. Right. Wait. Yeah. Go ahead, Judy.
So it seems like there's if there's no way of acknowledging the power differential in groups, then it's problematic. You know, there's no way to fix this. So it makes sense for people who are oppressed or silenced or in some sense excluded from decision making in some way, to want to have a space where they have security and agency and stuff like that. And so, but there's no way to allow that. You know what I'm saying? So the laws are, you can't discriminate.
I don't think there's no way. I mean, I think that's the whole reason why we're starting cooperatives in the first place. That's the whole reason we're building our own workplaces, right? Is because, you know, because the places that are available for us to work are so, you know, completely broken that we know they're not going to work for us. So that's why you go off and start your own thing to begin with. I think the question is, how do we not recreate those dynamics within the organizations that we build, because that stuff is embedded in us in the way that we're, you know, the way that we're raised and the way that we learn in the culture. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I sort of thought, you know, based on Matt's comment, and I forget Haji, and what you were talking about, you know, the whole sort of not fitting the culture, and how that, I guess you could use it, you know, in both to be possibly oppressive in the case of your friend, and in the other case, to like, you know, say you have to fit this like non-oppressive culture, but I mean, I think if like, you know, like, you want to have, you know, inclusive workplaces. It's, you know, better. It's important, I guess, when hiring, to make sure that those responsibilities for our employees to act in, you know, non-discriminatory, you know, non-oppressive manners. That's like clear. You know what I mean? That like it's a clear responsibility, and I mean that is clear and explicit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, even on like you know, list of qualifications. You know what I mean?
I mean, like, basically what you did was be more clear and explicit for the suggested language, right? Like, in order to fix it. So like, if that's your goal, I feel like it's possible. But in a work environment where that's not the goal,
Yeah.
it's not. Even if they change the language, it doesn't change the truth of that place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
People aren't always cognizant too, you know, they can say it,
Yeah.
you know, intentionally this, but not be cognizant of the way that they ask.
I think that's the whole anti-oppression project is getting cognizant, being aware of the intents and the consequences of your actions and your statements and your language. So that actually brings me back to the aorta document here. So we didn't really go over, but they did have some really specific suggestions for what practical things you can do to avoid recreating systems of oppression in your co-op that you're trying to build a new world inside the tent of your co-op. So I'll just briefly go through what these suggestions are. The first one is to do an exit survey. I kind of wish they hadn't put this one first, but but the concept of an exit survey is when somebody leaves your cooperative or leaves your workplace, to ask them, what about it was not working for them. And often when people, ideally we would like to ask people before they leave. We'd like people to stay in the co-op. But sometimes once someone has made a break from the co-op and they no longer feel invested in it and they're no longer trying to work on the relationships that they had in the co-op, they might be more willing to be truthful about what the problem was. So making sure that you do exit interviews with people who leave the co-op can highlight a problem. Ongoing individual and organizational education. Aorta is an organization that will come to your workplace and do trainings on these subjects. You can hire them, and they come to Boston a lot. So you can hire them. There's a group in Boston that's hiring them soon to work on their whole process around starting a new cooperative. And they're really good people, and it's a good thing to try and build into your budget for the longer term. And if you can't afford Aorta, then there's other resources that are available to try and build in education, especially for your new members, but also in an ongoing way for all your members, to instill these values in your organization. Clearly defining roles and expectations. The example given here is that sometimes you're in a meeting and people say, okay, who's going to volunteer to take notes, and who volunteers to take the notes. It could oftentimes women, for example, get volunteer for jobs that seem more secretarial. They might volunteer to do the cleanup or the dishes or something like that. So the idea here is to recognize all of those as roles. Don't overlook them like that's just something that gets done, but like actually lift them up into your eye height view, so that you see that as part of the work that you're doing together, and make sure that that job is assigned to somebody and not just left for someone to pick up. And then developing policies that address all these things. A lot of times co-ops really do get into problems when they just don't have policies about these things. And there are laws that protect people to an extent, but we want our policies to be better than the law most of the time. And so you can create internal policies that spell out how people are supposed to behave to each other in the cooperative. And that that's a thing that happens a lot when there's a problem in the cooperative. People are not getting along. Somebody feels threatened or undervalued, or what's the word I'm trying to think of? Somebody feels wronged, and there isn't a way to address it in the organization. The idea is to put the systems in place to address those things before they happen. So we have to move on to the next topic, but does anybody have anything that they want to add before we do? I know it's like it's like the most important topic in the whole co-op academy. We just gave it like 15 minutes.
Actually, would another strategy be what Danya was saying earlier about having the members be from a certain group, and then having people who actually are employed be more inclusive in that area? Is that an option?
Say it again.
So what you were saying about having the members who can vote. I think the members.
Oh, okay.
So the voters being from a certain group, like
All women.
all women.
Yeah.
An exclusive group. And then you're not necessarily being exclusive, you're being inclusive by having people who work for the group but don't have any votes.
I don't really know. I mean, I think that the example Danya gave was where women and men could both be interpreters, but only the women were the voting members of the collective, right?
So the owners.
And the owners.
In order. So the issue is most of the interpreting co-ops that we saw were, or interpreting business, were like the people with the higher jobs, the people with the best positions were men. Or the owners were men and all the interpreters were women. So like we like wanted to make a statement, this is just totally against that, and we're gonna do exactly the opposite. So it was a direct way to like have a business for undocumented women that had the skill but couldn't get the job. So we still, in a lot of the men that were part of the co-op as workers recognize that dynamic, and actually they, we were okay working with them. But it gave us a way to, if somebody didn't want to be part of the culture, I would say, didn't have to, because why you want to be in a job that you don't have. So it was a way to like, if you're not down for suffering this, that's like you're not being.
I mean, I think that there might be a difference too in that case where the interpreters considered like each one an entrepreneur, their own business owner. I mean, they weren't considered employees of the cooperative, is what I mean. They weren't, they didn't file a W-2 and get taxes taken out of their paycheck.
So nobody was an employee. We
Right.
were all contractors.
Right.
Because like basically the co-op was just like a contractor.
Yeah.
Thing.
I think that's a really major difference. If you have a worker co-op that's made up of people who are classified as employees, you can't. I really doubt you can. I don't think that's really possible to have only some of the people in the co-op qualify as members. I think that's pretty much. I don't think that's allowed. So I think that in that case, everybody who's eligible to be an employee at the co-op would have to be eligible to become a member as well. The question is, who do you want to invite in to become employees in the first place? I think, and in that way, you have a lot more leeway. Like you can't directly discriminate, but you can do a lot to make sure that you're attracting the kind of applicants that you want.
So what happens when you get, if somebody applies to your co-op who is male, they can work but they can't be owners. That can't go into any kind of legal framework though, right?
If you have a co-op where everybody's an employee and you have men and women employees, I don't think you can say that only men or only women can be members of the co-op and everybody else has to stay an employee. But if you're like, a voluntary business made up of independent business owners, which is essentially what the Interpreters Cooperative is, I don't really know. like, this is the kind of thing you have to talk to a lawyer about, but probably there are ways to say that we're an association of women interpreters, and that is how we define ourselves. And these women interpreters are not employees of the company, and that's why they're not subject to employment laws. They can voluntarily associate. But again, you have to be really mindful of employment laws. We like employment laws. They protect us in a lot of ways, and we're not in the business of trying to avoid them. But there's a million different kinds of ways to organize legally.
Yeah, and I know that like housing laws, for example, if you like own a building, and you can basically decide who you want to live in that place. Like people can.
Well, if they're living in the same household as you, yeah. I mean, but if they're not living in the same household as you, you have to be very open about who you can accept as a tenant or a neighbor. You don't have to accept just anybody as a roommate in your own home that you share a kitchen with. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rules that protect us against these things. So we do have to move along. Okay. So, oh shoot. It was a good thing that we had that conversation. I'm just gonna quickly try and make a pitch for who here loves filling out a timesheet. What? Danya, you love filling out your timesheet? So you love marking down everything that you did in the week, and you keep on top of it, right? Pretty much. Everybody else? Does everybody else fill out a timesheet? Shane? Every 6 months. Every 6 months. That's good. Okay. So briefly, there's so a lot of people when they join a cooperative, they're like, "Hooray! I'm free of timesheet reporting. I don't ever have to fill out a timesheet again." And I'm here to try and convince you that maybe it's a good idea to do that. So there was something in there about timesheets. At the top it says bcco.coop. Yeah, there you go. Can you show everybody what that looks like? Oh, please come on. Yes. Okay. Okay, so what is so I'm just going to do real quickly, what does number 1 say in there? Can somebody volunteer to read number 1?
Know what you're supposed to be spending your time on. Create time budgets for your year, week, month, or project. Alternative, draw a timeline.
Okay, so there's a couple different tools that I want to show you about. So who knows, does anybody ever get confused about what exactly they're supposed to be spending their time on and how long they should spend on one task compared to something else? Yeah, it's a hard thing. Let me show you a couple of things. So let's see. Let me show you this. I used to work in a construction company, and this is a thing that my boss used to do for every job that we did. So this is a job where we built a stairway at somebody's house. And my boss went in and he said, what is every step in this process and how many hours is it going to take us to do this? And he made a budget like this for every job, right? So the first thing is we're going to remove the old staircase. We're going to re-support the structural part of the staircase. We're going to do some math about how high the stairs need to be. So every step he wrote out a couple of hours here and there. And when he got to the bottom, he said, okay, this job is going to take 7 something like.
It's not. You gotta keep going.
All right. Here it is. 335 hours for this job. And it was important that we track the time. And so, you know, all of the people who worked on the job site had to mark their timesheets every day. They were like, I spent 3 hours working on the staircase today. And this is how we made sure that the company was making money. We did make money on this job, but we lost money on a lot of other jobs. Here's the thing that I use. This is my time map for how I'm supposed to spend my time. I spend a lot of time working in front of the computer. I have a lot of administrative tasks I have to do, talking to people, having meetings. I have my billable hours, which are the things I actually get paid to do. I have time that I spend finding new billable hours, finding new customers. Basically a whole bunch of things. And I've mapped out my week based on, you know, how much time I can spend on each of these things. So this is my visual representation of what my week needs to look like. Does anybody have something like this? Danya, you have something like this?
So, I got hired in my job to work 20 hours.
Okay.
Right? So,
yeah.
Which is really hard. I'm a part-time executive director of a small nonprofit.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, it was many things that I knew I couldn't do, and many things that I knew that if I didn't do it, I'm not gonna have more than 6 months of the job.
Yeah.
So, I like negotiated the time, and I say I'm gonna do these things, and I'm not gonna do these things.
Yeah.
So I have 7 things that I have to do, like board communications, running a board meeting, revising expenses, and then grant writing and fundraising. So I have to divide my hours on that, and we did like a lot of negotiating and how many hours a week I need to do this and how many hours a week I need to do that. So I'm not gonna do much of this.
So what's number 2 on that list of things about time? Do you have that in front of you?
No. Well, writing grants.
Oh yeah.
Number 2.
Okay. So you have it in front of you. What's number 2?
Track what you're spending time on.
So tracking your time. So how do you actually track your time? How do you keep track?
So I have a weekly, like I have like a spreadsheet, and each tab is a week, and
okay. How else? What do people use for timesheets? Like, how do you keep a timesheet? Do you use paper? Do you use something on the computer?
Excel. We use an Excel document, spreadsheet. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not very thorough. So at my job, but at my past job, I used to work doing what you were basically laying out for construction projects.
Yeah.
And they had cost codes for every single activity.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah.
it varies.
Yeah.
But I do admin now, so it's like all.
Okay. Yeah. You guys have a spreadsheet?
We have 2 methods. One is our invoicing, and then the other one is a spreadsheet.
Okay. There's a lot of different tools you guys are doing. You have your time out pedaling, and then you have your time back in the office.
Yeah.
How do you keep track of
We
that?
have a Google form that goes to a Google spreadsheet.
Okay.
And we have some things, we realize we don't have enough categories right now. We have like handicapping work, sales work, and all other admin is lumped together. So we can figure out how much admin work we're spending on this, and this.
Okay.
But right now we have just 3 categories.
I'm gonna give you an advertisement for a service that I like for tracking your time. Huh? Do you know this? This is a thing called Toggle. Anybody know this one? This is what I use to track my time. So I'm here at Co-op Academy right now. This is the stuff that I've done this week. I can give myself a report about how many hours that I spent and how many of them were billable to my customers. So I've worked 16 hours this week so far. So this is a really good thing. It's got an app that you can use on your phone. You can say what customer you were working for, what time you arrived at their location, what time you left. It's got an easy thing that you can use on the web or on your phone. I love this one. It's free. It's one of those things that it's free to use, but you can also upgrade it. I paid $5 a month to use this, and I think it's really worth it. I'm spending way too much time on this. What else does it say about timesheets?
Compare your time budget to the time you spend on a usually on a weekly basis. For
Okay.
accountability.
So here's a timesheet that I made for another co-op, and this just has a place to say, what were you doing? We were doing sales. What customer were you working for? Any notes about what you did, and how many hours you spent on the project. It looks this way because that's the best way to input this into QuickBooks. Shoot. Okay. You can't even see it anyway.
So what's the form that you're using there?
So this is QuickBooks Online.
Oh, okay.
A lot of businesses use QuickBooks to track their time. That timesheet that I just showed you is designed to look like this, which it does when it's not on the projector. Sorry. So it's just the same format where you have the days of the week across the top. That's what this timesheet looks like. So the timesheet looks like the QuickBooks input page, and that makes it easier for the bookkeeper to get the time into the thing. So the idea is you have your time budget, you have your time sheet, you have your report, and you want to compare at the end of the day. The other thing you want to do is analyze what you spent your time on and use it in your business. I learned at the construction company, nobody's going to be motivated to keep a track of their time unless they know what you're using that information for. So it's got to come back and be useful to all the members of the co-op. And I'm going to leave it there because we want to save time for the last part of the session, which is going over your financials. Sorry, I'm just like running from one topic to another, but that's the way it is. So we've got 25 minutes left.
This is a chance to get Stacy to give a quick glance at what you have, give you some feedback, or if it's not financials that you really need right now, feel free to pick another topic and ask around that. So we're going to break into our co-ops, and Stacy will be floating around, and a couple of others of us will be floating around to get ready for the little mini session.
Who brought their financials? Great, okay. You guys did? Anybody else bring their projected financials or budget? Okay. Okay. Let's break into our groups.